Hey, thanks guys for being with us today. I'm excited to have another conversation with Vortex Routesetting here, joining us with Rocco Bocchicchio. And we're going to talk about Routesetter longevity. And we've got a couple guests in the room as well. And I'm going to just pass it off. Foxman and Justin of Vortex Routesetting, um, big volunteers, big contributors to our community in the last few years. And parts of the CBWA committees and contributing data and really awesome. You got to check them out at vortexroutesetting.com. And I'm going to hand it over to them.
Thanks,
Thank you
Scott.
so much, Scott. I can take a crack at introducing our guest, Rocco. I'm gesturing this way because that's where he is on my screen, but I don't know how that's going to work out in the recording. Um, so Rocco, with those who know him, is a longtime legend in the route setting community. He's been route setting for a couple of decades, training people for a couple of decades. He and I have worked together for a minute now. We've had a lot of conversations about how we can make route setting more sustainable for, you know, individuals and for gyms. We did a little bit of looking into how we could test and track route setter wellness. Um, with mixed results, I'll say. But it's definitely something that he's been putting a lot of thought and effort into for a while now. So we are excited to have him back to talk more about route setter wellness and fitness. We had him on about a year ago talking about individual training plans, and now we're looking at it from a little bit more of a holistic, systematic perspective. So thank you for coming on. We've also got a couple of guests in the room. We've moved to a new model where people are submitting applications to come join the conversations and be a little bit more active participants. So I would love if you guys would introduce yourselves real briefly. Tucker, if we want to start with you.
Sure. I'm Tucker. I'm the director of route setting for the movement gyms in Texas. I started climbing around 2006, setting around 2015. I started with Summit gyms in Dallas, um, and kind of just progressed my way up through the ranks. And I've just had a really good time in my route setting career and climbing, and I'm, really passionate about trying to help move us forward in a good direction so we can, build better teams and, try and have better tactics and streamline our systems so we can take better care of our teams and hopefully just get to a better spot.
Well, thank
Sweet.
you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
How about you,
And
Adam?
Adam?
Yeah. My name's Adam. I'm the director of route setting for Hoosier Heights. I've been studying for about a decade, and yeah, similar to Tucker, really love the sport of climbing and the job of route setting, and wanting to build a program for all the setters under me to increase that longevity and make it so that they don't burn out as fast in their setting and climbing, and then they're worried about getting injured, so then they don't climb as much. So then they start getting burnt out because they're just setting every day, but they're not climbing, and they don't remember why they got into the sport in the first place. So, yeah.
A tale as old as time right there.
Yeah, it's this vicious circle. Rocco, you want to dive in?
Sure. So, first of all, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate the hosts giving me the opportunity to come on, and for you two for being interested in attending and listening to what I have to say. To expand just a little bit on what Foxman was saying during her intro, I've been setting and climbing for just about 30 years. And I took over as a head route setter like 6 months after I started climbing, which isn't like the industry standard now, but it was kind of one of those things where they were like, "Hey, does anyone want to be head route setter?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess I'll do it." Um, but I've also been a coach and training athletes that aren't professionals within the industry for a long time. Um, so I have a little bit of I guess I'm uniquely qualified in a way because I have a lot of experience climbing and training and coaching, but also route setting experience. So it gives me a lot of perspective on this topic, and it is something that I think about a lot. I've put maybe the past 4 or 5 years into focusing really heavily on trying to understand how we can improve the life of setters and the careers of setters. I will say that I guess the tagline for the majority of my work is that I feel innovation within how the industry functions in route setting and the structures of the programs has been stunted for a really long time. I feel like that's primarily because the industry found something kind of organically that worked while it was growing rapidly. But I do believe that just because it works doesn't mean that it works well, and certainly doesn't mean that there's no room for improvement and it can't work better. We know that turnover is really high amongst route setters. We know injury occurrence is high, and burnout is a really real thing. Being in my 40s, I know bouncing around and setting with teams that finding someone my age that's still setting is actually not even a common thing nowadays. Certainly not someone who's setting full time. I believe that there is resistance to changing the way things are done, in large part because, frankly, there's a real risk of monetary loss if the customers don't react well to the impacts of the changes, particularly if they have some impact on the frequency of setting, not necessarily the quality, although I think that better taken care of and more well-rested setters produce a better product. So the quality may go up, but frequency may go down, and a customer base may have to adjust to a change, and that can be a difficult sell.
Something that I've been like thinking about a lot, like since I've gone fully freelance, I've been traveling a lot more and looking at the resistance to change. Like you're talking about like the system developing organically and it worked fine earlier. But it's not necessarily something that's sustainable as like the industry expands very quickly. And I think that's something that I see kind of across the board with a lot of gym practices as I travel and see, like, for instance, different like safety systems, things that seemed fine in 1992, maybe not fine anymore. And I think what you're saying is it's a similar thing within like that route setting wellness space as well.
Yeah, and I mean, it was not that long ago that full-time route setting wasn't a thing. It wasn't a career. Like the the turnover of routes and problems in gyms has only gotten quicker, and the volume has increased, and the volume of setting days has increased continuously over, say, the past decade. I would like to go as far as to say that I don't really think that the fear of monetary loss, particularly among a member base, uh, is founded as long as the change is instituted in the right way. So yeah, I mean, first of all, it costs more to replace a setter than to keep one. I don't necessarily mean the like primarily in the monetary investment in training a new setter. But with all this experience, I can say that efficiency has like a really huge impact on the quality of setting, but also like on the overall strain on setters' bodies, right? So just imagine for a moment that you can keep a team of 5 in a facility for 20 years, setting within that facility, without them getting injured and burning out of setting, and like you have a sustainable program that allows those people to stick around. They're going to know the terrain really well. They'll know the holds really well. They'll have an understanding of the customers within that region or even within that facility. And frankly, like when you have a really seasoned group of setters that know what they're doing and your skeletons come out great because they're familiar with the facility, and then, the total volume that you need to put in forerunning and stuff is going to drop, right? So there's a lot of value there that I think is hard to quantify unless you have the experience of working on a team that knows a facility really well, or with an individual setter, say, that has been at a facility much longer than the other people. So I think there's a lot of value there.
So I'm curious, Adam and Tucker, have you seen kind of what Rocco is talking about reflected in your setting teams?
Yeah, I would say we have one facility that has our lowest turnover, and that team has worked together for a long time. And at that one facility, they know their terrain very well. They're decently efficient. I wouldn't say the most efficient of our teams, but on the higher end of efficiency. Um, but they're also our strongest setters, so that also plays a factor. So I see that a little bit. I also see bringing in new setters and new blood, and that like having such a positive impact on the setting in the facility. Which I know you're not saying don't bring in new blood, like that's not what you're saying. But yeah,
Mhm.
I think in a general sense, yes. But I think more about the individual setters who are experienced. And maybe we have moved an experienced setter from a gym to another gym in the region, and they seem to, they adapt really well, of course, based on their experience. And so they can kind of help drive the team and drive that efficiency. But I think that like what Rocco was saying is the perfect world if you have a group of really experienced route setters in a place for a long time. Um, then I mean you can only get something good out of it. I think that it's hard for me to think of an example because something really long term like that I think is few and far between.
Yeah,
So,
makes
oh, go on. Sorry, I was going to say. So, if you were to, if you were to maybe tag one or two reasons off the top of your head why you feel that people who have been involved in it that long are few and far between.
Mm. I mean, I think it depends. I think that everybody's situation is different. I mean, I think that, I think a really classic story is that route setters are young, and then maybe you route set for 2, 5 years, something like that, and then maybe decide that this isn't the profession that you want, and you just change your mind. Um, and I think that that's a really common thing that I see. I think that also the injury is another really common one. I think that people also feel the the pressure of getting the job done on top of an injury, and combined with their own desires to climb outside of the job, and they want to be able to project or to climb at their limit or to do something like that. And it's hard things to balance. It's really difficult.
yeah. I would say for us, of the people who like start route setting or become route setters, the biggest thing is they move. We're in the Midwest, we're in Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky. Like, there's not, I mean, we have Red River Gorge, but like, we have so many people who move to either go out west or they go to live at the Red or they go down south because they just want to be closer to more climbing or outside climbing. So we get a lot of people that move.
I think all of those things are true. And I'm as I'm listening to both of you talk, I'm like, yep, that one and that one. And so there's just so many things that are factors. And yeah, whether it's moving to climbing or their partner gets a new job and they relocate, or they're just looking for something else, or they decide to like leave and go into an industry that has more lucrative opportunities or whatever. Like there's only like it the from my perspective, it's like how many years does it take to make like a really experienced route setter versus like how many of them are exiting or these off ramps and like how can we train them? Like, and there's like it doesn't math.
Well, and what I hear a lot of is just it's that sustainability question. So like, if your partner has a career that is more lucrative and more stable and they move, you're going to move with them. If you want to be able to be, the Adam, your point of like somebody's moving closer to outdoor climbing, you can't just make that appear necessarily in different locations. But if you are in an area where there is outdoor climbing, how can you foster an environment where route setters are able to train and be able to climb and climb at their limit, like you were talking about, Tucker? So yeah, I
I
toss
think
back to you, Rocco. Sorry.
And,
well, yeah, let me jump in really quick because I have
mhm.
one of the things that I think about is like I feel like when someone first starts out as a route setter, they have this like, you know, idealistic vision. They're like, oh my gosh, this is so much fun. I love rock climbing and it's going to be so amazing. And then I just want to like build.
I'm gonna get
And
so strong.
yeah, and I do think that like route setting makes great climbers because it like you reverse engineer movement and there's so much value there. But then there's this wall of fatigue and then there's all of this other like the physicality of the job that a lot of people just don't understand. And so I think like the reason we're in this room talking is to figure out like how to solve it. So I think yeah, let's kick it back to you, Rocco. Like what ideas you have?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, it doesn't matter if you're in a setter in Michigan or someone that's like in the heart of like the Front Range or the Wasatch here in Salt Lake City, near where I live. If your setters are like injured and or tired all the time, they're going to be doing the same amount of outdoor climbing, no matter where they are. So, yeah, I think again, what you were just saying, Justin, like the reason we're having this conversation is so that, um, hopefully not only can you preserve people's careers in setting and keep them around long enough to acquire that expertise, but also to allow them a greater opportunity to achieve their own like personal climbing goals and continue to love the sport outside of work. And that's one thing that just came to mind when you guys were giving examples is that uh, route setting is quite unique in that it's partially, physically like a construction job, right? But I don't, know people who hang drywall for a living who do it on their weekends and also when they go on vacation, right? So I think that's one of the things that makes it quite difficult, and it kind of puts the burden of providing adequate rest uh, within the work schedule, right? Um, because unlike other trades, which, in my opinion, route setting is partially a construction trade, at least physically, uh, you're not just going to hang out and rest on the weekends because you love climbing, right? And that's why you're doing it. And I think that makes it really, really unique and difficult to manage. So I'll start off by saying that, as far as wellness perks go, like access to massage therapists and having PTs on hand to help people recover from injuries and stuff. I think that kind of the elephant in the room that doesn't get said plainly enough is that the best wellness perk a gym can offer setters is the opportunity to rest, to effectively manage their fatigue through adequate rest. Um, and the second thing would be access to professional, individualized training and injury prevention programs that guide them both in their time working and their time training, right? Having someone on hand who each individual person can talk to, and you can look at the workload and what's happening in the program and be able to make adjustments to not just their work life, but also what they're doing privately, I think is a really, really valuable thing to look at. And I don't really know off the top of my head, and I believe we discussed this before, Justin and Foxman. I don't know of any gyms that have constant year-round access to a skilled personal trainer that can help guide and manage an individual setter's workload and their personal training load outside of work.
Yeah,
I'll
not that I
also,
know of.
yeah.
What does having a personal trainer managing a setter's workload look like to you?
So I have a little bit more detail on paper that we'll get to in a minute, but I think part of it is that your training load should be complementary to your workload. And what I mean by that is, I'll expand on something that Justin just said as well about making great climbers. Is that if you are doing really, really high volumes of setting or setting really long routes all the time, right? Say for an extended period of time, and that's your primary workload, and it's way below your maximum level, right? You are doing something that is way more physically fatiguing and difficult to recover from, okay? And having someone who can look at that on the fly and say, oh man, you did an immense amount of volume last week at submaximal effort, right? And this would take some cooperation between the head route setter or the directors and even the individual to maybe keep a journal or something or put notes down at the end of their setting day every day. As a means of that trainer being able to look at it and say, okay, well, instead of next week us doing a whole bunch of high volume kind of stamina based training outside of work, we're going to shift into either specific recovery type training or really low volume, high intensity stuff that's going to complement your workload instead of doing more of the same, right? Same thing with like repetitive motion. If you've spent a lot of time setting on vertical to slabby terrain, right? I, as a trainer, would be like, okay, cool. For a moment here, instead of exacerbating the effects that that movement pattern has had on your body, we're not going to do any like vertical plane pulling for a little bit. We're going to switch you to say like more horizontal pulling motions in your training or even isometric versions of that that are going to, again, work something or work a movement pattern or amount of volume or intensity that is not what you've been doing at work. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And as far as what Justin was saying earlier, I think I'd like to add that setting tends to make really good climbers as far as movement skills go, because the forerunning that we're doing during a normal setting day is what I and most other trainers would quantify as, for lack of a better term, junk mileage. And what I mean by that is it's a really, really high volume of typically really low effort movement to say moderate effort movement, right? And what that produces by and large are route setters that have incredible, almost superhuman capacity, right? At a submaximal level, which is why you'll see so many setters, or at least I have seen a lot of setters that have come to me for training, be able to go outside, say, and flash V10 or flash V9 all day long. And the hardest thing they climb is V10. And they can't push into that 11, 12 range, right? You can climb V9, 7 of them in a day, no problem. But V10 is really, really hard, right? Because work is countering your ability to move the needle on that upper end because you can't do that in a state of constant fatigue, right? And I'll tell you guys ahead of time that I think that even if we were to implement everything that I can possibly think of, everything that Foxman and Justin can think of to restructure programs in a way that are going to be more sustainable for setters, I think that the biggest hurdle is going to be setters needing to detrain themselves from existing in a constant state of fatigue, right? Like you're going to have to get used to your body feeling better, and resting And that can be a difficult transition. I've known several people, Foxman being one of them, that I've worked with training, and they'll they'll switch jobs or take an extended break from settings, such as like when the gym shut down during COVID. And all of a sudden they're climbing the hardest things that they've ever done. And then they go back to setting and they start to see that decline again because they're existing in a constant state of fatigue. So even if we can collectively make route setting more sustainable for setters, the setters are going to have to adjust as well, right? And learn how to rest properly and adjust to feeling different than they're used to. Because most of us are passionate about what we do. That's why we do it. And we're workaholics, and we'll put 10 more burns in on that move, on that boulder or whatever, just to try to nail it down perfectly, right? And it's just only adding to the fatigue load, right?
So I would bet that everyone in this room has experienced that version where it's like, I'll just try it one more time. We can add another star to this boulder. I think the thing that what you just said kind of resonates in my mind is that we if we're thinking about ourselves or if we're thinking about our employees, we can't govern what they do outside of work. And like sometimes, especially like I have a lot of younger people on my team and, they feel invincible and it's really hard to be like, hey, you got to show up and perform on Monday. And like, is it a good idea to X or Y? But then also like, I'm not trying to take away their ability to like go outside and send that thing they've been working on for a year. And so like, I'm curious, Rocco, if you or anyone, if you have any ideas on like how you might sort of like account for that, right? Like it's like we're maybe asking them to rise to an occasion and have a professionalism, but also like I don't know, is it just we have to fix what's broken so that that's afforded?
And I have an answer to that for sure. I think a big one is planning and scheduling, right? Um, so I'll just ask a question of you, Justin. Like, how far out do you schedule? Meaning, what's going to be turned over in your facility, when, how much volume, when your events are. Do you program rest periods in? Do you use cycle intensity? Do you have, anything like that within the program? Or is it just the same thing every year, year in and year out?
That's a really good question. Yeah, I feel fortunate. Like the company I work for plans very far in advance as far as our
Mm-hmm.
events go. But as far as our like daily operations, I don't think that we're like mapping that out in the way that you just described. I think that there is a general plan where we like, hey, we're moving in this direction. Like we always go
Mm-hmm.
A to B to C to D. Um, but we like adjust in real time based on like, oh, this person called out and we need to like adjust the
Mm-hmm.
output, and then that puts us off track. And so like there's a calibration that is constantly happening. But there's nothing by any means that I'm like handing a route setter that says, here's your 2026 agenda, week one, 3 boulders in this terrain, week, and here's the styles, and here's what I'm going to ask you to climb, right? Like, if
Well,
that's kind of what you're asking about.
I
Yeah,
mean,
more sort of, sort of.
if I can jump in and just talk about like my experience in like working with you, Rocco, as a full-time route setter who was also trying to get stronger. Like Rocco is asking me usually for 3 to 6 months of like events. Like, when are you going to be setting regionals and divisionals? And there were times when I would like hand my schedule to you and you're like, well, that's not going to work, right? Because trying to like actually build in some kind of training schedule that works with an event schedule takes like a lot of like calibration and like timing. And unless you actually have the information for like when route setters are going to be doing like very hard physical weeks, when we need to perform really well, am I going to be able to climb this thing when I go outside to like whatever climbing trip I'm doing? Um, Trying to get all of that to line up was like every time I like handed you my schedule, you were just like a no. Are you?
Well, yeah, I mean, because again, when you have someone that's trying to do both of those things, right? Um, it's really hard for them to hear that the best thing that they might want to do, say in the 2 weeks that they have between setting two major events, is just to rest and not train, right? Like you'll feel better for it and have a better chance of doing your project if you don't like train hard. I'm not saying you can't climb, right? But it goes back to what I was saying before, where let's say you're going somewhere and you're going to set a lead competition on, 60-foot tall walls, right? And then you have 2 weeks and then you're going to do that again. If you have access to a trainer that can see that happening in your schedule and you say, hey, in these 2 weeks between, I want you doing hard projecting sessions, say no more than like 30 minutes of hard trying something really, really hard for you, either outside on the board, and that's it. Like, and maybe one lifting session or something a week that's extremely high intensity, very, very low volume. So it is complementary to the things that you're putting your body through on those bookends of events, right? I think that so all of the science and all of the most successful tippy top trainers within climbing agree on one common concept is that your training should be planned a year in advance. A whole year of your training should be planned in advance, at least outlined, right? And that's not to say it's completely rigid. You have to leave room for flexibility because we're all humans, and even more so within route setters, right? But that same concept of having a plan well in advance can be applied to setters just with like a handful of modifications. So yeah, I really do believe that, at the very least, 6 months to a year of advanced planning, particularly for things like competitions, maybe large resets of sections of walls, people's vacations, holidays, their climbing trips, etc., would be extremely helpful to people within the industry. Even if you just have the framework and it still has to get adjusted on the fly, having a plan and having the change here or there, if it doesn't go perfectly, which it won't, is better than not having one at all, right? A longer term schedule, it gives you a lot of advantages. I think that it allows you greater control over fatigue, which is one of the primary reasons that trainers use it for individual climbing athletes. Like an example would be planning like a deload or a taper a week or two prior to a competition, right? Just so that you know that your setters are going to be as fresh as possible. And if that competition is sprung on you 2 months in advance, right, it can derail everyone's training plans. Say you have someone that already is feeling fatigued. Say they just got back from a vacation or they already planned a vacation and they're going to be getting back from 2 weeks of outdoor climbing right before they have to set for a comp, and they didn't know about that when they planned their vacation. You're just asking for trouble. You're asking that person to risk injury or, you know, consciously not climb on their vacation, right?
I
So,
I love the concept as an idea. Um, I constantly run into the issue of pulling teeth with my route setters to get schedules a month in advance from that. Um, we're similar to Justin. We plan like our bigger events, our competitions that we host as far out and mostly a year out. Like we always do them around the same time, but try and land on dates sooner rather than later. And only things like USAC events, stuff that like we have limited, application periods and all that kind of stuff that kind of limits that slower. But I talked to a head route setter today to try and schedule his staff, his setting team for February, what days they're going to work. And I was like, yeah, you need to have that in for February by Friday. And I guarantee you he's going to be late because he's going to have to pull teeth with his setters for them to get their schedules. And I think it's very rare for setters or most climbers that I interact with to know when their vacations are a year in advance, know when their climbing trips are a year in advance. Um, so that feels a little like a pipe dream to me.
And see, again, like this is kind of what I was going back to with going back to what I was saying as far as climbing being unique or route setting being unique in that climbing is also what you're doing in your free time, right?
Hmm.
And I think that um, it feels like a pipe dream because number one, it hasn't been tried really. And also I think that, you know, every setter out there that I know complains about the wear and tear on their bodies, about their inability to do the things that they want to do outside of setting, the toll it takes on their own climbing ability and their goals. And so I think that a lot of these things have to be presented in a framework of really trying to help, right? And I do believe that if you could manage to make it work and have a proof of concept and have setters that were less fatigued, accomplishing more of their goals, they would be damn sure to get their scheduling and requests in a timely manner. Even if it, like, again, maybe a year is a pipe dream, but can you do 4 months? Can
Hmm.
you do 6 months? You
I
know?
think there's multiple components too, where it's like having the overall event schedule from the gym, getting travel schedules from the route setters, but we're kind of still talking about this system where everybody's kind of redlining all of the time. So what I'm curious about is if there's a way for us to build our gym operations in such a way that we're kind of reducing that red line so that if a route setter does decide, oh, hey, I didn't realize I have a 3 day weekend. Can I go do this climbing trip? That they're not already entering it with such a high level of fatigue that it becomes like this necessity to like build everything around that singular 3 day trip. Is there a way to decrease that like overall fatigue in how we're structuring our programs?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Um, that kind of macro, like big view, broad view, scheduling is like only part of the equation, right? And again, simply a suggestion. A lot of what I'm presenting to you guys here is theory based on experience, right? And I like to present these ideas so that people within their own setting programs can take the opportunity to experiment and um, maybe find things that work, maybe even uniquely to your team and facility, right? So just keep that in mind.
Hmm.
Uh, so the other, what Foxman is talking about would be considered um, like rotating volume and intensity within your setting program, right? And what I mean by that, again, to go back and just to clarify for everybody, like really, really high intensity, low volume exercise is the easiest thing to recover from. While like low to moderate intensity, really high volume exercise is harder to recover from. So let's say you're like a setter who climbs V5, right? And you do 30 V0s in a 4 running session, or you do 3v5s. That 3v5s is always going to be easier to recover from, even though V0 is so much below your level. Same concept applies to weightlifting, right? So the idea here would be to, Foxman and I actually experimented with this briefly while I was doing some freelance setting with her at one of her former places where she set at. And the idea is that you have a portion of the team that is carrying the load of the higher volume, lower intensity forerunning, right? And then you have a small portion of the team that's focusing on higher intensity, lower volume, right? So those people are going to be still contributing, but recovering to some degree. And then you have to flip-flop those people back and forth over time so that, say you spend 2 weeks handling lower intensity, higher volume, you get a little beat up, it's harder to recover from, and then you give your body 2 weeks to do higher intensity, lower volume, it's an opportunity to recover. Something that climbing facilities aren't doing, that I really wish they would do, is to give people the opportunity to plan actual rest periods as well. And this kind of goes back to the scheduling, and it also ties into the volume intensity cycling, is that everybody needs like proper rest time, no matter what type of athlete you are, no matter what construction trade you're in, you need rest time, right? So I do believe that there should be at least some industry standard where you have a block, maybe 1 week at a time, just a couple times a year, where the setting volume is decreased significantly, right? By at least say 50% of your normal production volume periodically throughout the year to give everybody a refresh, or just stopped altogether, where you have, 2 weeks in the spring and 2 weeks in the fall, where your customers know that there's not going to be new fresh setting and they got to live with it for a little while, right?
Well,
I
and
am,
just a lot of gyms do that over the holidays anyways.
mhm,
Yeah. So I mean,
yeah,
it's not something that customers should be totally unfamiliar with.
yeah. And again, during those holidays, what are those route setters doing? They're very likely going climbing, Um, uh, so what I was going to say about that is that that doesn't necessarily mean that setters go unpaid, and it doesn't mean that they're not fulfilling a role within the gym. I look at those rest periods where the setting, say, stops for a week or two at a time as an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity for the setters to potentially be scheduled to come in during peak hours to interact with, give beta, and essentially fulfill the role of instructors, just roving the floor and interacting directly with the customers, right? Um, and I really love this idea because number one, it creates a connection between the setting team and the customers, right? It humanizes the route setters. So although they're not present setting, creating new things for people to enjoy, they are giving their time and energy and expertise to interact with those customers, and it kind of softens the blow a little bit. It's not like, oh, they're just sitting on a beach somewhere. They're actually here, like engaging with the customers, and it's very humanizing. I feel like it can also create a much more friendly and honest and open feedback loop between the customers and the route setters. If they know each other by name now and they have shared an experience of climbing together, or the route setter gets to grab one of the members and say, hey, like I set this thing over here I'm really proud of, you should come try it, and it's actually acting more like a normal climber and patron than an employee of the gym. I think that is something maybe a little old school that we used to do that got lost a bit. So these downtimes would be helping the setters recover both physically and, creatively, but also really establishing a connection with the people that they are creating the routes for, right?
Like cultivating that community that a lot of gyms are like selling, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah.
I don't know anyone better to teach and convey the like movement to your customer base than the people that are actually putting the holes on the wall for them, right? You can actually pass along maybe a little bit of your own style of movement that other people might not even recognize, especially newer climbers, by interacting with them and sharing those lessons with them. And then the next time they see a boulder that, in Kaya or plastic or whatever has your name on it, they might be like, oh, I know, like that guy taught me to heel hook, You know what I mean? And it's like, cool, well, maybe that will apply to this route or this boulder, if that makes any kind of sense. I know that sounds really hokey and generalized, but it can be a lot more like specific than that. Um, Also, it gives you an opportunity, that rest period gives you an opportunity at least for full reset of equipment, right? Like going full on cleaning in your hold space, organizing your bolt carts, getting back to zero so that you don't have this like compounding mess if you especially are in a high turnover, stressful, highly demanding like facility. Uh, I don't really know any setting program that wouldn't benefit from doing like full on top to bottom housekeeping every 4 months, just to give everyone a clean space to work in and familiarize everyone where everything is in the hold room,
Mhm.
um, can also add to that efficiency that I was talking about earlier.
So I wanted to check in with, Adam and Tucker to see like how you guys are structuring your programs and like gaps that you feel like could be addressed. We're coming up on, I don't actually know how long it's been, but I feel like we're coming up on maybe 45 minutes-ish. So I want to make sure that we have time to like address your guys' questions, what you came here for.
Um, I really liked what Rocco said about scheduling our route setting to be, kind of alternate between high intensity and low intensity things. We've kind of done some of this in some of our locations here, where the team may set 2 days of steeper boulders, and then the third day is slab terrain, and then the fourth day is back to steep terrain, and then it's the weekend or something like that. Um, and we kind of have committed to that if the slab in the gym is a much smaller section than the rest of the steep terrain that exists, it maybe is just that the slab terrain gets turned over faster, and that's kind of maybe some people would say it's a sacrifice, some people maybe not, but um, that's just something that we know is happening, and is something that we're worth is worth it to us to make sure that they have that little bit of rest in the middle of the week. I think that we've also done a lot of work, like Rocco was saying, about trying to connect with the community, and times when we're trying to have some rest, or we're trying to um, make up hours if we are setting on a day that maybe has a lot of high traffic or something like that, and we want to have limited wall closures so we're not in the way of the customer. And just in general, I think we've done a lot of work in that regard about just trying to have more connections and come out of the shadows a little bit as route setters, and have that face time with the community. Um, I think that there's more work to be done there, especially on the scheduling side. I'm really curious to think more about these deload weeks. Actually, is really interesting to me, and something that we've talked about before, but have never really committed to doing. And I wonder if this is maybe on like a per person basis. Maybe Rocco's deload week is on week 1, and then Adam's is week 2, and then mine is week 3. So that way there's still some production happening, and there's still some work being done, but individuals can have their rest periods throughout the month. So I think that's a really good idea. We've also tried to do things where um, a route setter maybe is not setting at all that day. Maybe they just are forerunning, or maybe they just set and then they don't forerun, and they do hold washing and they do maintenance for the entire shift. Or we have some shifts where a route setter is not forerunning, but they are helping make tweaks. They're on the drill and they're on the ladder and kind of helping gather holds and make tweaks and that sort of thing. So I'm really excited about some of those ideas. I love the deload weeks, especially before comps or even just high intensity sections of the gym is really cool.
And you can build those deload weeks, say, into Like if you live in an area where there is outdoor climbing and you know that your setters are going to be focusing on that, you can try to help them out by like, doing a deload week or staggering a deload week or two somehow throughout like the prime seasons, right? Like you could do one, say, in the peak of spring season and the peak of fall season. So they know that they're going to have an opportunity, say, like a week after that to like perform and feel a little better than they normally would if you kind of want to tie together the personal side of things with the work element. Two things. First thing, that's pretty much what I meant, the individual staggering, like one person's deloading and like, can you take turns? But like a little bit of a step further, even where this is going to be hard to explain. It's better to see it. But let's say you have 5 setters, right? You have 2 weeks where setters 1 and 2 do really high volume of forerunning at like a moderate to low intensity, right? And then you have another 2 that do not a lot of forerunning, but say closer to their limit, like harder things, right? And then the 5th one is resting, right? And so you go through those 2 weeks, resting meaning not forerunning, right? So then you go through 2 weeks of that, and then you have 2 weeks where, they flip flop. And 2 of the setters that were doing the really high volume, low intensity go into lower volume, high intensity. The other 2 flip flop into the longer, and then another one takes a rest, and you just cycle, like kind of piggyback your way through the year that way, right? I know that seems a little bit dependent on climbers' ability, right? But again, if you plan, I feel like you can get around that most of the time. Maybe, and gyms don't have, a lot of facilities don't have a lot of super hard climbing to begin with, like not a high volume of it anyway. So, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but you don't necessarily have to be setting like a V11 boulder every single session, right? So that's something to think about. And I also would like to address the week-long schedule, because that's something I have in my notes as well that I think is really important. So if we know that lower volume, higher intensity is easier to recover from, and higher volume, low intensity is hardest to recover from, you can progress that through your week. And what I mean by that is, like, let's say that Monday, you're going to set the hardest of the boulders for your week, right? Or at least the highest possible intensity for each individual team member, and give them some responsibility to be forerunning near their limit at a lower volume of moves done, right? And then you fill in and make the climbing get easier but higher volume throughout the week, right? So that your Monday is much easier to recover from than, say, your Thursday. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Because having the rest in the middle of the week only, if you did, say, lower intensity, higher volume at the beginning of the week, that rest is going to be inadequate to help people bounce back. But if you flip-flop them, it will be much easier for, like, you're putting the harder things to recover from later in the week and the easier things at the beginning of the week, right? Exactly the way that training programs are typically written, where the volume and intensity, volume increases, intensity lowers throughout the week as you get towards the end, right? Prior to a longer rest. Yeah.
Something that, sorry, Rocco, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, something you just said made me think of one of the practices that I've been fortunate enough to implement at one of the organizations I'm at, is that to a couple of things. One is that we are fortunate. We have forerunning roles, that we have people who, these are sometimes people who have like a part-time role in the organization, who might have been a community member. And sometimes this person might be super strong, and sometimes this person might not be. And we can like min max like how we're utilizing that individual and what needs we have for the day. And I think that has proven to go a long way in allowing rest for the team who is maybe like the 3 or 4 day a week. We've never done what you've described, where it's like, that very meticulous sort of like flipping and flopping. but there is almost like an organic version of that that's happening like on a daily basis. And I'm really excited to kind of like dive in and maybe like see if there's a more intricate version. But it's very often the case where someone's like, "Hey, I'm not feeling great. I'm just gonna like make all the changes for you, and like I'm not gonna forerun." Um,
Hmm.
I think a lot of us maybe have had that day for ourselves, and maybe also been on the team where we like pull a little extra because someone is needing of that.
And I think to some degree, a lot of these ideas, the scheduling and the cycling in particular, um, come with the assumption almost that you'll have less of those days where you feel like total trash and you have to change the plan, right? Like, I know it's a perfect world scenario, but in some way, it gives more predictability and it also gives people's bodies uh, an ability to adapt, right? Like I keep bringing up construction trades, okay? Cycling, and I have a lot of construction background too, so that's why I use it as an example because I'm also familiar with it, is that like, again, let's say I am a painter, okay? And that's my trade. 1 week, 2 weeks, I might have to paint a whole house. And I'm up and down second story tall ladders and using a sprayer and carrying huge 5 gallon buckets of paint because we're doing a lot of volume of work and it just beats you down, right? But then inevitably you have a week where you have to go and stain a staircase and it feels leisurely almost comparative to the highly intense work. In the trades, that ebbs and flows, say throughout an entire year and certainly throughout an entire career. Um, it's not a built-in feature of route setting, you know. You can go hard every single session, right? So I feel like it's something that we have to consciously engineer or it won't happen, right? Uh, Having 5 setters and 3 designated forerunners only affords you more flexibility and opportunity to build in cycles and maybe even have 2 people who are on forerunning rest at a time and, therefore increase the benefits.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We're kind of coming up on the end of our conversation, I believe. I want to just check in with you, Rocco, and make sure that you feel like you were able to give us the information that you were looking to at the start of this call and check in with our guests again and see if you guys have any final questions.
I always have a million more things to say, so.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
I guess one of my big questions is something that we've implemented recently for some of our longer term setters is like a wellness reimbursement to use to help recovery and sustainability. And I'm curious what you would find as like your top 3 most effective recovery tools for a route setter. Obviously, like you said, rest, but like from like I can go out and do this and that will help my body be healthier. What would your recommendations be there?
Top 3. I would say number 1 is you ever heard the saying prevention is the best medicine?
Mm-hmm.
High load, low intensity lifting for sure. There isn't, and that includes both periods of doing isometrics, which are the easiest thing to recover from, right? And doing, full range of motion movements as well. The really heavy loading, say 80% of your maximum and above, exactly like I was talking about with intensity and volume impacts on fatigue. Those really high intensity movements have the most positive effects on your connective tissue. And they are almost always, or I should say always, complementary to what you're doing setting, right? Because there's no load that you're putting your body under in setting or climbing that is above 80% of your maximum, Like, think about it. When do you put 95% of your force through one hand? Like, almost never, right? But your training load can be that or higher, right? Those are the things that are going to help people prevent injury, right? I think that a lifting program that's year round in that format is super, like, a huge contributor to injury prevention. And it doesn't take a lot either, right? Like just a few movements, like say like one push and one hip hinge movement. So like a deadlift or a squat and like some bench variation or overhead press, right? You want to vary those things slightly, like maybe every 6 weeks or so. But I think that setters should be lifting at least once a week in a really, really low volume, high intensity format like that, like year round, you know? If there's an in-season time or a competition time, something like that, where you have competition season and they're going to be doing like a lot, or they want to perform more outside, I suggest shifting into overcoming isometrics instead in those same, say, force vectors or ranges of motion. So you could switch out a deadlift for, say, like a mid-thigh pull, which is where you load a bar that's positioned at your mid-thigh with more than you can lift, and you just pull against that without moving. That's what an overcoming isometric is, essentially. It's like pulling or pushing against like an immovable object. Those are the easiest to recover from, so really good for keeping the connective tissue healthy, keeping recruitment high in times that you want to perform, but not fatigue yourself any further. And I have a lot more to say on that, but that should do for now. Can I say one more thing real quick?
Yeah.
Something that I do suggest specifically for Routesetters, and I actually use this with a lot of my own training clients that are not Routesetters, is again, look at a bigger schedule. Okay, look at the bigger picture. So you want to pick a number of reps that say you want to accomplish within a week, right? And that's your number. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna every session I have to do 5 sets of 3 or something like that, right? Like you're gonna say I have to do 15 reps this week, right? And that affords you the flexibility to get your lifting or your supplemental like injury prevention stuff done, as depending on how you feel, right? Not just at a predetermined time. And it's really, really helpful for setters because, like, let's say, you get done setting on Thursday and it went super smoothly and everything's cleaned up early and you're sitting around chatting and everything's good and you feel good. You're already warmed up. You can walk in the weight room, do, 2 sets of 3 or 3 sets of 3, and you checked off a large portion of your week just there in that one session. And you don't have to do like a bunch of warm up time. You can also like incorporate those things directly into your warm up. Say you're going to go into the gym and you're going to have a climbing session on a board on Saturday because it's your free time or something. You can go do a few of your lifts, check off, oh, I did 3 of my 15 for the week, and then go and have your climbing session, right? So it gives you the ability, if you set a larger goal, say weekly or monthly number of reps, to just tick those off whenever you can, right? It makes it a lot easier to get it done.
Yeah, what I was gonna say, knowing Rocco that you have a lot still to say, is like I would direct people to like contact you if they have training questions because you have a lot of knowledge. I will say that like I greatly benefited from like your support as a coach and just like learned a lot about like how to actually manage my own fitness. So yeah, that's like my little personal plug.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
And
Um,
my other 2 of the top 3 things is rest and rest. Rest and eat. Rest and eat. Eat well, not like Snickers bars in between,
dang it.
burns on a boulder or something. Like actually like try to hit your macros if you can.
So ice cream going straight to the biceps is not the move.
Look, I am the last person to tell you not to do that because I would be a hypocrite,
Yeah.
right?
No.
Um, but yeah, I mean, look, like uh, I don't want to go too far down this road, but like nutrition is really important, and I think it's
Hmm.
one of those like low-hanging fruit things that people neglect, right?
Hmm.
And trying to get root setters to not live on Red Bull and coffee and stuff from the candy thing at the front desk is just as hard as getting them to schedule, right? But
Yeah.
if we want to change things for the better
Yeah.
and help people feel better, like it also requires a little bit of professional discipline, I think, you
Hmm.
know? Um, and also conveying to the younger setters that although you're 19 right now, what you do will affect you in the future. And even though you can say forerun until you're bleeding from volumes and, pound a pint of ice cream and a 2 liter of Coke and go out and send V11 on Saturday, doesn't mean that if you didn't eat properly and count your number of attempts on things and be a little more reserved with what you're doing and train properly and stuff like that, that you couldn't climb V13 on
Hmm.
Saturday. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
I
yeah.
mean, I think that's a huge thing that I've been dealing with building the program is how do I build it in a way that incentivizes the setters to take advantage of it. Um, and we do hire a lot of younger setters, or that tends to be our demographic of route setters currently. And it's like we can preach all day how important it is and the benefits of it and what was and wasn't provided years ago and all this kind of stuff.
Hmm.
But until they choose that it's valuable to them, like there's nothing we can do to force them to do things. Uh,
Yeah.
Well, I will say if you're able to say, if you give me your schedule, I can work in a deload week for you so that you can
sure,
go send, you know?
but you also, yeah, I don't know. We're working through a lot and trying to make route saying more professional, and so like um, giving setters paid stretch time, and then it's hard to get them to actually use paid warm up time. Some small silly things, but I think that's part of like building a new program and making the route saying profession more sustainable and being like, hey, you're 19 now, but you won't always be 19. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to plug it right here. Maybe part of that issue is making route setting more professional and sustainable as a career to people who aren't 19,
hmm
so that you can have someone that knows what it's like not to be 19 on
hmm
your route setting team to provide that mentorship and guidance, right?
yeah,
Because an entire team of 19-year-olds is off the rails.
right,
There's
yeah.
19-year-old, they're boys, little boys and girls, they're going to be crazy. So, any other questions from you guys?
I mean, I would love resources. Like you've mentioned, nutrition is good, and you obviously have a ton of knowledge and information on like lifting, but I know I would like it. I'm sure people who watch this recording afterwards would love like directions to do research into if you have good places to do that research or
Mhm.
resources.
Yeah, I can try to put something together
Mhm.
for CBJ to provide, to give people guidance or whatever. That would be cool too. Yeah. Always. Hey man, I'm just like I have all these things I would like to see happen,
Yeah.
and I care about this stuff a lot. So I'm more than willing to just obviously just like share my ideas, because I may not ever get the opportunity to implement them.
hmm
Um, Certainly not all of them, right?
Yeah.
So any thoughts that I have based on my experience that I can put out there into the world that's going to help other people,
hmm
especially within climbing and in route setting, it's like, I'm more than happy to do that.